Overlook, what's your trouble? Is that the great Finn leader himself, in his joy kimono, on his statue riding the high horse there for Hengist? Father of authors, it is himself. Yon there, is it that? On Fanarine Common, you're thinking of Astley's amphitheatre, where the bobby restrained you making sugar-stuffed coats to the ghost white horse of the peppers. Throw the cobwebs from your eyes, woman, and spread your washing proper. It's well I know your sort of slop. Ireland sober as Ireland stiff. Lord, help you, Maria, full of grief, the Lord is with me. Your prayers. I thought so, Madam Angot.
The built environment that we live in today was largely shaped by modernism. The buildings we inhabit, the chair we sit on, and the graphic design that surround us have been fully influenced by the aesthetics and the ideology of the modernist design. But what is modernism? At the core of modernism lies the idea that the world had to be fundamentally rethought. The carnage of the First World War and the Russian Revolution led to widespread utopian favor, a belief that the human condition could be healed by the new approaches to art and design. Focusing on most basic elements of daily life, like domestic goods and clothes, architects and designers set to reinvent this form for a new century. In their drive to transform society, modernist architects set out to industrialize the building process. New construction techniques and the use of materials such as steel, concrete and glass would reduce the cost and allow the mass production. Although modernism was not conceived as a style, but more like a collection of ideas. It was a term that covered a range of movements in art, architecture, design and literature, which largely rejects the style that came before it. The methodology was flourished and was prominent in the years between the world wars. In 1914, Asquith had passed the Home Rule Bill, but it had proved unsatisfactory for the majority of the population in Ireland, as it granted less autonomy than that enjoyed by other dominions. During the First World War in 1916, the so-called Easter Rising broke out in Dublin, a massive siege towards many buildings in the centre of the city, including the General Post Office. The rising was crushed and 15 of its leaders were executed. After the war, the Liberal Party obtained the majority and Lloyd George tried to solve the Irish question. In 1919, the representative of the political party Sinn Féin, which literally means ourselves alone in Irish, refused to sit in the Westminster Parliament. They formed a separated parliament, the Dáil, and declared Ireland to be an independent republic. After a long civil war in Ireland, the Irish Free State was constituted in 1921. Ulster, a province of Ireland, contracted out, and the Irish Free State, in the course of the years, got free of the remaining ties with England until the proclamation of the Republic of Ireland in 1949. The literary production of the 20th century can be considered as a prolongation of the Victorian epoch. Until 1914, when a substantial break with the past occurred, it reflects the more freedom from Victorian restraints, but an increasing sense of anxiety and discomfort due to the growing international tension. The century had become under gloomy auspices, although Britain was victorious and did not bring out the results expected. The production of the 20s is marked by a mood of disappointment and pessimism caused by the consequences of the war. The interwar years show an effort to establish a new tradition, and so events such as the collapse of the New York Exchange in 1929 and its effect on the world economy, the rising of Nazism, the Spanish Civil War, the advancement of totalitarianism, marked the beginning of a new era which was completely different from the past. The old principles and way of life appeared more and more inadequate to a changing world and literary traditions, now outmoded. Poets freed themselves of the influence of the Romantic predecessors and abandoned poetic diction for more effective directions, and began to use irregular verses and words taken from ordinary colloquial speech. Novelists, on the other hand, did their best to change the refined framework of the Victorian novel. Writers substituted the accepted method of narration with a new one, revealing not only a character's action and mood, but the mysterious traces of his unconscious mind.
I make for myself now an experience of blazing fire. I place it near my body, but it does not warm me in the least. I lay a stick upon it, and the stick either burns or remains green, as I please. I call up water and pour it on the fire, and absolutely no difference ensues. I account for all such facts by calling this whole train of experiences unreal, a mental train. Mental fire is what won't burn real sticks. Mental water is what won't necessarily put out even a mental fire. Mental knives may be sharp, but they won't cut real wood. Their points won't wound. With real objects, on the contrary, consequences always accrue, and thus the real experiences get sifted from the mental ones, the things from our thoughts of them, fanciful or true, and precipitated together as the stable part of the whole experience. Chaos, under the name of the physical world.
In the past century, the novel had been enriched with romantic, realistic and naturalistic trends and established itself as a genre of a spoken variety. It seemed like no more territories were available for further development, and the novel became concerned with precision of texture and form. But realism naturalism, in representing the outward reality and exterior events, left the irrational world of our conscious unexplored. In a time in which psychology and Freud's theories had begun to throw light upon it, the new field attracted the interest of the writers, and the novel underwent a substantial change. The philosopher William James had stated,
Consciousness connotes a kind of external relation and does not denote a special stuff or way of being. The peculiarity of our experiences, that they not only are, but are known, which their conscious quality is invoked to explain, is better explained by their relations, these relations themselves being experiences to one another. The stream of thinking, which I recognize emphatically as a phenomenon, is only a careless name for what, when scrutinized, reveals itself to consist chiefly of the stream of my breathing. The I think, which Kant said must be able to accompany all my objects, is the I breathe, which actually does accompany them. There are other internal facts besides, and these increase the assets of consciousness. But breath, which was ever the original of spirit, breath moving outwards between the glottis and the nostrils, is, I am persuaded, the essence out of which philosophers have constructed the entity known to them as consciousness.
From here, the term stream of consciousness was adopted and meant the continuous flow of the mind. Plus, it defined a new narrative technique. The new novel was no longer concerned with a chronological sequence of exterior facts framing a well-constructed plot, but it was concerned with a mental process which found its best medium in the interior monologue. The most representative writers who used this technique were Virginia Woolf and, of course, James Joyce. As an Irish author living during the struggle of independence from England, on one hand, James Joyce recognizes the Irish values such as hospitality, the ideals of nationalism, and plus, he is evidently in love with Dublin, which is the one and only setting of all his works. On the other hand, he harshly criticizes his city and Ireland, underlining the corrupt atmosphere, the sense of paralysis, the lack of modern development, and a suffocating attachment to old traditions. Joyce's aim was to represent the human condition as a universal and objective reality, so his concerns were not limited to the present time or problems of the contemporary society. His conception of the artist's task made him preserve a detached and objective vision of life, and this stood apart from the questions of the time and the great political causes. Not only he refused to take a share in moments in supporting the Irish independence or the Irish cultural renaissance, but he broke every link with the past by resolving to live abroad in order to acquire a cosmopolitan outlook. Joyce introduced the novelty of the technique of the stream of consciousness in English novel, but also employed a wide range of stylistic and linguistic innovations. He used parodies by imitating other writers and different genres, and the mythical method to transcend humdrum and logical background and to express complex and multiple meanings. In the linguistic fields, Joyce created new words or deformed the original meanings as to reach a particular effect, and through puns and wordplays, foreign words and structures, he became, without any doubt, one of the most original modern novels writers. Of a particular relevance during his exile in France will be the figure of Sylvia Beach, founder of the Shakespeare and Company Library, place of gathering of many important writers in the French capital, like Ernest Hemingway, Ezra Pound, and Francis Scott Fitzgerald. Nonetheless, publisher of James Joyce's masterpiece Ulysses, and center of the English and American culture in Paris. In an interview, decades later, Beach will describe James Joyce as such.
I went into a room off the dining room where André Spear had a lot of books piled up. It was his little library. And leaning in the corner against the bookshelves was James Joyce, drooping. And I went up to him boldly and spoke to him, and we had a conversation together. And he seemed very much interested in my bookshop. He said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I have a bookshop." "Oh, what have you? Give me the address." And I told him it's Shakespeare and Company, and it's 8 Rue du Puitrin, Paris 6. Joyce was a great mixer. People think that he must have been aloof and such a great man and all that. He was never at all standoffish and used to talk with everyone and be very nice, and he was a great favorite with everybody he met. He came one day to show me this little review, and he said, "You see, this is now being completely suppressed, and my book, as he pronounced it, will never come out." So he sat there with his head in his hands, and I said to him, "Would you like me to publish Ulysses?" And he said, "I would." He seemed very much relieved, in fact. He seemed very sensitive, terribly, and very, very interesting. And some people asked me, "Were you disappointed when you met James Joyce?" And I always say, never at all, for he was anything but disappointing.